I loved the same man all my life. But in Hollywood, that means pretending not to love at all. We lived together like two shadows, under the same roof, but had to call each other best friends. Randolph Scott, a name once hailed as an icon of Hollywood. He was immortalized in the hearts of audiences as the righteous cowboy, stoic, honorable, and unwavering in his stand for justice across the dusty frames of countless westerns. But after his death, a letter was unexpectedly discovered in his private home, and it sent shockwaves through the entire film industry. In it, Randolph Scott wrote a confession about his true self, a secret he had kept hidden his entire life. Only in death did he finally dare to confront it and speak the truth. So what exactly did the letter contain? Did the story within it change the way audiences saw the Western hero they had believed in for so long? All will be revealed in today's video. The first thing that makes it impossible to look away from Randolph Scott's final letter is a deeply emotional and unmistakably suggestive mention of one man, Cary Grant. Not just a well-matched co-star, not merely a so-called close friend. Cary Grant was the one who had walked alongside Scott through both the most radiant days and the long, quiet years, by his side silently for nearly 2 decades. But what made that mention so haunting wasn't nostalgia. It was the things Scott couldn't or wouldn't say out loud. In the letter, Scott wrote, "We could not live honestly with each other in the open light, but our moments will always be what I cherish the most." Just one sentence. But it was enough to leave the world stunned. It was no longer a simple nod to a friend. It was a confession, aching and filled with sorrow. Was there something between Scott and Cary Grant that ran deeper than friendship behind the stoic, upright cowboy of the American West? Was there a heart that once loved and had been crushed under the unforgiving mold Hollywood demanded? Looking back at the 1930s, one easily sees how brutal Hollywood's landscape was. Same-sex relationships were considered absolutely taboo, not only unspeakable, but fundamentally unacceptable. Yet despite all that, Scott and Grant lived together in a seaside mansion at 2700 Pacific Coast Highway, Malibu, from 1933 to 1944. That address wasn't just a home. It was a refuge, a shelter for two souls who couldn't live their truth in front of the world. A photo taken at an Oscar after-party in 1939, captured by the Los Angeles Examiner, once sent ripples through industry backrooms. The two stood close, under dim lights, their eyes meeting in a moment that was too intimate, too silent, too real. Back then, viewers might have overlooked it. But now, after reading the letter, no one can ever look at that photo the same way again. And that wasn't the end of it. A former housemaid from the Malibu home, Helen G. Donnelly, once revealed, in a 1974 interview, "I once saw them holding hands in the kitchen when they thought no one was watching. Not like friends. The way you hold someone's hand when you know you're about to lose them forever." Her words were once dismissed as fantasy, but now they feel eerily truthful. Even when Cary Grant married actress Virginia Cherrill in 1942, just a few weeks later, he was still frequently seen visiting Scott's home. At the time, the press was confused. Why were two men still living near each other with no professional reason to do so? They explained it away: lifelong friends, golf buddies. But they always dodged any questions about their private lives. And maybe it was that prolonged silence, the truth no one dared to speak, that truly made Scott a lonely man. On the outside, he was the unshakable hero. But inside, he was a quiet soul, longing to be loved, yet never daring to voice it. Could this very relationship, so intimate, yet so conflicted, be the reason Scott penned such aching final words? Was this the greatest secret he carried his entire life? One he only dared release on paper. Once he was beyond judgment. We may never have an absolute answer. But those handwritten words, that late trembling confession, revealed a different portrait of Randolph Scott. A man more human, more profound, and far more wounded than the cowboy icon we saw on screen. But the letter didn't stop at a buried love. Behind it lay a loneliness that never let go, an endless inner struggle, and a haunting question that Randolph Scott carried with him to the end of his days. Did anyone ever truly understand who I really was? But then Randolph Scott's final letter went far beyond what anyone had imagined. Because after the wistful lines about Cary Grant, Scott began to reveal the darkest and most hidden part of his soul, a part he had buried for so long that he sometimes forgot it was still burning quietly inside him. It wasn't about physical scars or losses that could be named. It was a loneliness that stretched over half a century, an emptiness as vast as the master bedroom in his mansion at 345 North Beverly Drive, where he had lived from 1963 until the day he died. In the letter, Scott wrote in fine ink, tilted slightly to the left, "I lived my whole life playing a role, not on screen, but in life itself. And the audience, heartbreakingly, was me." Just one sentence, but everything shattered. The heroic image of the Western cowboy that Hollywood once held so dearly turned out to be nothing more than a beautiful mask. And the man behind the mask, a victim himself. He didn't embellish, nor did he try to make himself tragic. Yet every word, every tiny dash on the page, cut deep into the carefully built legend of the invincible heartthrob the public once adored. On March 2nd, 1987, Randolph Scott took his last breath in the very bedroom where he had written that letter, facing a mahogany desk by the window, overlooking a garden of white flowers. The funeral was held quietly, without press invites, without wreaths from film studios. Only a few old friends attended, along with a nephew named Jeffrey, the one who discovered the letter hidden inside an old 1903 Bible, a book Scott always kept by his bedside, but never once brought to church. And beneath the letter, something even more shocking was found, a short audio recording on a cassette tape previously unknown to the public. In it, Scott's voice echoed, raspy but clear, repeating a single sentence 3 times like a final plea. "I'm sorry for letting them create a version of me that I couldn't escape." When both the letter and the tape were released by Jeffrey during a brief interview with Vanity Fair in 1989, the public's perception of Randolph Scott changed overnight. No longer the unshakable cowboy who strode across deserts in Ride the High Country or the Tall T, he emerged as a heartbreakingly fragile man, one who had long stood between fame and selfhood and never found a way